This is the 10 Eyewitness News with Juanita Phillips.
Good evening. Australia is officially in election mode tonight. We'll go to the polls on March the 13th. Prime Minister Paul Keating announced the election date this afternoon, hot on the heels of Labor's loss of government in Western Australia.
The moment the Prime Minister and Mrs Keating entered Parliament House, it was obvious this was no ordinary Sunday afternoon press conference. Then, flanked by most of his personal staff, Mr Keating made the announcement the nation has long been waiting for.
Called upon the Governor-General early this afternoon and recommended that the House of Representatives and half the Senate be dissolved for an election on the 13th of March.
That will mean a short election campaign, 34 days, which is only one day more than the minimum required by law.
This is an election where the way of life of this country is really up for grabs, with an opposition with a highly ideological blinkered policy, but we're reminding people of the great post-war economic changes have been presided over by this government, and only this government will be able to draw down that strength of the Australian people.
Well, we're delighted that he's finally called it. I think it's been very important to end the uncertainty. There's been a massive amount of uncertainty for almost 2 years in Australia with paralysed government. And this government's been in power for now 10 years, and 10 years is long enough. I think most people feel that time's up for Labor. They've had their chance.
The Prime Minister has leapt into battle only hours after the voters in Western Australia tossed out a Labor government. But party strategists say it is not a disaster, close analysis revealing the government would retain most of its seats in the West. The coalition achieved a bare minimum victory, but did awaken a lot of swinging voter support.
Examining the figures in detail, it is now clear Labor is in deep trouble in provincial cities and most country towns.
The Democrats also gained in the WA poll, but now predict a Conservative sweep across Australia.
By the end of 1993, I believe we'll have a Liberal government federally, we'll have a Liberal government in South Australia, and there's a very famous saying that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
For that reason, the Democrats say they should be given the balance of power when we go to the polls, which will be held almost 3 years to the day since the last time the nation voted. Paul Smith, 10 Eyewitness News.
And coming up next after the late news on Meet the Press, Federal Employment Minister Kim Beazley talks about Labor's chances in next month's election. A tragic loss for the sports world today. Tennis legend Arthur Ashe has died in New York from an AIDS-related illness. Ashe was the first Negro to win the US Open, also the first black man to win Wimbledon. He recently announced he'd contracted AIDS from a blood transfusion, keeping his illness secret for 4 years. Back in Australia, 2 huge bushfires are threatening the outskirts of Hobart. The fires started yesterday after 2 weeks of dry, hot weather, destroying 10 square kilometres of bushland. One fire is threatening the historic town of Richmond. Firefighters are hoping for a cool change tonight. And in Sydney, a 25-year-old man's been charged with the shotgun murder of a semi-retired couple. The alleged gunman led police on a high-speed chase before they stopped his car by shooting a tyre. To sports news now, and Easts have beaten Manly in the World Sevens final at the Sydney Football Stadium.
East's victory saved the major sponsor Coca-Cola from embarrassment. Manly is sponsored by arch-rival Pepsi, but 2 tries to playmaker Gary Freeman helped the Roosters to an 18-12 win.
Freeman still in front of them by a pretty big margin. He's running away from them.
Riddick Bowe is still the world heavyweight boxing champion, stopping challenger Michael Dokes in the first round.